In the first part of section 5 here, we're going to be finding the distance between any 2 points on the coordinate plane. So if you had 1, 2, and then negative 3, 1, plot those 2 points, and we could find the distance between those 2 points by using the Pythagorean theorem. We could. We're not going to. It's based on the Pythagorean theorem, but actually we have a formula that can compute the distance between any 2 points. And that formula is radical x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. Now, the reason why I like to use formulas so much is because all you have to do is plug in the numbers and do the math. So let's look at example 1 here. It is always going to be beneficial if you were to write down the formula first every single time. It gets you used to writing formulas and gets you used to using them. So I'm going to write down x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. Now I've got the square root over all of that. Now all I'm going to do is just plug in the numbers. Now, so I'm going to have radical. Now, x2 minus x1, that'll be 3 minus 1 quantity squared plus, and then 1 minus 5 quantity squared equals. Now all I have to do is the math in this thing. What's 3 minus 1? 2. What's 2 squared? 4. Plus 1 minus 5 is what? Negative 4. Negative 4 squared, positive 16. So we're looking at the square root of 20. So use your calculator and figure out what the square root of 20 is. So if you have this style of calculator, you're going to do radical 20, press enter, 2 radical 5. And notice what the directions say to do. Step A, round off to the nearest tenth. Step B, give us the simplified radical. So the answer for B anyway, radical 20 is 2 radical 5. Go back to your calculator. So you have 2 radical 5. Now your calculator already knows that you have 2 radical 5 in there. It memorizes the 2 radical 5. So you don't have to do anything other than see the double arrow key right above the enter sign, at the enter button. Press that button, the double arrow, and it will give you the decimal. In this case, if we're going to round it off to the nearest tenth, it would be what? 4.5 is correct. So rounding it off to the nearest tenth would be 4.5. Having it, the simplified radical would be 2 radical 5. Let's try number 2. The D distance between those 2 points is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Always write down the formula first. Just helps you get used to using it, right? So we're going to have the square root of, subtract the x's, 6 minus 0 squared, plus, now subtract the y's, 8 minus 0 squared. 6 minus 0 is 6, squared is 36, plus 8 minus 0 is 8, squared is 64. So we're talking about the square root of 100, which is what? 10. Well, since we don't have a radical here, we don't need to fill that part of it out. Your answer would just be 10. Number 3. D equals the square root of x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. Now I've got to be careful here. We're going to take negative 4 minus 3 and square it. Plus. Now we're going to have a minus sign in there, but what 2 numbers are you going to be subtracting? Well, it's going to be negative 4 in the first spot, minus what? Negative 4. There's the minus sign. The green is the minus sign. The 4 is the negative sign, so it's negative 4 minus negative 4. Which gets you what? Well, negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7 squared again, positive 49, plus, what's negative 4 minus negative 4? 0. So we're talking about the square root of 49, which is 7. Again, because it comes out to a nice round number, we don't need the simplified radical. The answer is 7. Go ahead and try number 4, see what you come up with. Pause this video while you do that, and when you're ready, start it up again. So I came up with radical 72, and when I go to my calculator, radical 72 should get 6 radical 2. Rounding that off to the nearest tenth would be what? 8.5 would be correct. So we'll have 8.5. So there are your two answers for this problem. Try number 5, see how you do. Have you noticed that you can type this in exactly how you see it? If you did the square root of the parentheses 4 minus negative 1 quantity squared plus 3 minus 3 quantity squared and just press your equals, you'll get 5, and that's the answer here. So we're looking at 5 being the answer. All you have to do is just plug it in. Since we don't have to use a simplified radical, we won't include that. Let's look at number 6. Again, go ahead and pause the video. You just try to do number 6 and see if we come up with the same thing. Hopefully you came up with 11. Again, the simplified radical, we won't need one since it comes out to a nice round number like that. But if you're not coming up with these numbers, look to see if number 1, make sure this is a plus sign here. Make sure this is a minus sign here and here. Are you squaring the parentheses? In other words, make sure your formula is, if you're not coming up with the right answers here, make sure you're starting off with the right formula. Once you plug the numbers into the formula, just plug that into your calculator, you should be getting the right answer. Go ahead and try number 7. Here's what it would look like if you were entering this in your calculator. The square root of 7 minus 2, that quantity squared, plus the quantity 1 minus negative 4. And it is 1 minus negative 4, right? All right. Did you come up with 5 radical 2? If you didn't, make sure you have 1 minus negative 4 there. Anyway, your answer to this one is 5 radical 2. So we'll go back to the paper and put 5 radical 2. Actually, the radical is supposed to be answer B, I guess, right? 5 radical 2. And then what would that be as your rounded off to the nearest tenth? Press that double arrow key, and you get 7.1, it looks like. So 7.1 and 5 radical 2 are your two answers. Go ahead and try both 8 and 9. Go ahead and stop the video and come back as soon as you get these done. In number 8, you should have come up with a distance of 13. So if you were to check the distance between these 2 points, you'd get 13. And in number 9, if you're looking at the distance between these 2 points, you're going to get the square root of 65. Rounding that off to the nearest tenth would be 8.1. Well, I hope that made sense for you. Check out the next video in order to come up with the second part of this section. We'll see you in class.